Hello, welcome to STIA 1123 Programming 2. Today I would like to talk on structured programming versus object-oriented programming. The differences between both programming paradigm, and why do we need to understand object-oriented programming in the first place. So in this example, I'm going to describe a simple application to store information on a certain item. So let's say I would like to store information on, for example, a chair. So normally if I would like to store information on a chair, so from my perspective, there are certain information that I would like to store. So let's say that I want to store information from inventory point of view. So in this case, I would like to store information on, let's say, for every item we have like chair ID. Second thing is that chair type, and maybe the third one, chair color. Alright, so these are the three information that I would like to store in my application. So normally in structured programming, so the way that we write program for such application is that we need to store information in a variable. So I'm going to use simple variable. I'm not going to use array to describe this application. So for example, here I do have these three variables that I'm going to declare as a simple string. So let's say string chair ID, string chair type, and the other one is string chair color. Alright, so those are the three information that I would like to store for a single item. Right, so in structured programming, normally we store information and we break the information, the operation based on the problems. So here I need to come out with methods that allow me to store information or to display back the information to the console. Alright, so I'm going to have a few methods or functions that basically going to store the information. So for example, display info or display chair info. Another one, insert chair info. So let's say I'm going to have these two functions that's going to show or to describe how Procedural works. Alright, so I do have these three variables. I'm going to break it down into smaller operation called functions. So there are two functions that I managed to come out with. Display chair information. Okay, so static void display chair info, and another one static void insert chair info. Right, so those are the two functions that I'm going to use for this structured procedural programming. Alright, so since the variable stored in the following structure inside the main method, so since I cannot access this variable here, so I'm going to put it inside a class. Okay, I'm going to put it here, part of the class, so that I can access these three variables from each of the methods here. Alright, so to do that, so for example, I want to display system.out.println chair ID, so plus chair ID I need to declare this as a static content because the method here is a static method, so only static type variable can access static content. So I'm going to print out chair type and another one chair color. So to insert chair information, so I'm going to assign value for each the chair type, chair ID, chair type, and another one chair color. So I'm going to provide value. Either you want to use scanner, that is just another option for you, but I'm just going to make it simple. So let's say chair ID is 1, 2, 3, chair types wood, chair color black. So the way that we call this method from main something like this. Right, so as you can see, if you run this application, you get the following information: chair ID, chair type, and chair color. So you have one chair for this application. So the application contains three variables and two method, static method that can be accessed from main method. However, these three variables, even though it describe for one chair, one specific object, but they are loosely connected. They are not belong or connected in some way. They are variables on their own. Okay, they are not protected, and it can be changed throughout the programming. Okay, so even though you can create another variable here to describe for chair number 2, but let's say chair ID 1, type 1, color 1. Okay, so this, if I would like to have for second chair, so I can describe this for second chair, but each of the variables here, they are loosely connected. Right, so of course you can use array that basically will simplify the variables naming. However, it's still the same. It basically loosely connected variable. It is not being protected. For each variable, there's no entity that can control each of these variable. Alright, so this is basically how you develop application in structured. Of course, this is not the best way, but it basically describes the idea in structured programming, where you use all these variables and methods or functions that you call, and they are loosely linked in the programming. So next, I'm going to show how to develop the same application using object-oriented concept. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to remove all this method. So leave it So in object-oriented programming, the way that we do our programming is basically using the concept of object, a real object. So in this case, when we identify an object, for example, we want to store information about a chair, so we can identify the general characteristic of a chair. Okay, so as I mentioned in the class, when we identify an object basically belongs to a certain class. So that class basically the general description of the object. So for the same application in object-oriented programming, so if you like to store information, for example, for a chair, so the first thing that we need to do is to create a class for the chair. So the general representation of a chair, so this it still remains the same. So we have these three variables that describe about a chair, and we have two variables that these two methods that also part of a chair. So in object-oriented programming, we need to create a new class called chair. So this class basically a general representation of a chair. So inside this class we're going to have these 3 variables and 2 methods. Okay, so string chair ID, string chair type, and string chair color. Alright, and we have two methods: display chair info and another one, insert chair info. Okay, so in object-oriented programming, normally we define the variable as a private, but for the sake of this discussion I'm not going to put that. I'm not going to use a constructor for this example. I'm just going to show how the variable can be what we call as a tightly coupled into the object. So to display chair info, so the same system.out.println chair ID plus chair ID okay, and then we have chair type, and the last one, chair color. Same. So chair ID is equal 1 to 3, chair chair type equal wood, and chair color equal black. Alright, so the way that we create what we call as object in Java is by using the following syntax: the name of the class, name of the object, let's say focusing on chair 1, equal new chair. Alright, now we basically create this object chair 1, and then we can use all the variables that tightly couple to chair 1. So let's say in this class I need to assign the value first, because there's no value in this chair. Whenever I create this object, there's no value yet, so I need to give it value. So I call this method using insert info. Okay, so call the object chair 1 insert info, and then that basically will call this method and assign the value here. And then I want to print out the information, chair 1 dot display chair info. Right? So when I run this application, it's basically print out the same thing. However, now the variables and the methods tightly couple to this class chair, and I can just create more object out of it. Let's say I want to create chair number 2, chair 2, just create new chair, and this chair 2 totally different object from chair 1. I can insert, or if I want to add information on my own, because in this example the data is being stored in this chair info, so I can use constructor. So constructor I'm going to describe later. If maybe I can use constructor here. So if you remember constructor, so here I don't have to, so I just change the name of the class is chair, right? So and then I can submit value string A, string B, and string C. It represent chair ID, chair type, and also chair color. Right, so in this case, whenever I created new object out of it, I can just call and assign. Okay, assign. So this is a constructor. So a constructor, whenever you create new object of it, you need to assign value to it. So here I need to assign, let's say, chair ID 1 to 3, wood color black, and second one chair ID 42, this one is metal, and the color is red. Okay, so chair 2 dot display info, and whenever you run the application, you get two separate objects that describe for two separate objects, and they are tightly coupled. Chair 1 hold this tree information, chair 2 hold this tree information. Different operation, different value that tightly coupled to object chair 2 and also object chair 1, and you can create as many chair as you like. So if you compare with structured programming, the solutions provided in object-oriented programming basically is more elegant compared to structured programming. Alright, so that is basically how you do it, how you create object. So it is very important for you to identify the object clearly, right? So you can just see around you and look at an object, come out a class that generally describe about that object, and put it into this structure, and identify the variables. So normally we describe variable as a private, because in object-oriented programming, normally data hiding is very important. So we describe the data as a private, the variables as a private, and the only way that you can access the data is by through methods. Alright, so that is basically how the difference between structured programming and object-oriented programming. So I hope you can understand this concept through the example that I've given here. Thank you.